Encore à tous, bienvenue, bonne année lunaire. Merci pour votre inscription à notre deuxième événement de la série immobilière, cette fois-ci sous le format de, bien évidemment, webinaire virtuel, présenté par l'Association commerciale Hong Kong-Canada, chapitre de Montréal, et commandité par Broccolini, Groupe Brevia et DS Avocats, avec le soutien de notre partenaire média Bâtiments. Je me présente, je suis Cindy Ho, la vice-présidente nationale de HKCBA et associée chez DS Avocats. J'espère que vous allez bien et que nous allons pouvoir vous fournir un survol sur un sujet d'actualité, les villes de l'avenir, avec un panel très expérimenté. Ce webinaire se déroulera en anglais, mais n'hésitez pas à communiquer avec nous en français, anglais ou même chinois. En particulier, n'hésitez pas à nous demander des questions en cliquant sur l'onglet Q&A en anglais ou Q&R en français en bas de votre écran ou en haut, dépendamment de votre configuration. Vous pouvez dès lors nous envoyer vos questions et nous aurons une période dédiée après le panel. Good morning and welcome everyone. Happy Lunar New Year. May the year of the ox bring you and yours prosperity, but most importantly, good health. Thank you for registering to our second event, part of our real estate series, this time presented virtually, organized by the Hong Kong-Canada Business Association, Montreal chapter, and sponsored by Broccolini, Brevia Group, and DS Lawyers, with the support of our media partner, Bâtiments. My name is Cindy Ho, and I'm the National Vice Chair of HKCBA and partner at DS Lawyers. I hope you're all doing well. Today, we will deliver a leading-edge overview of clean technology, pioneer green building products, and residential and commercial development projects that include innovation to transform buildings to benefit both developers and end users. This webinar will be mainly in English, but please feel free to ask us your questions in French, English, or even Chinese. In particular, you could already ask us our questions using the Q&A function or chat function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll gladly answer them at the end of the panel in a dedicated Q&A period. Before we start, I will introduce a little bit about HKCBA and our seasoned panelists. HKCBA is a not-for-profit organization with mission to expand commercial relationships between Canada and Hong Kong, as well as throughout Asia, using Hong Kong as a platform for advancing this objective. We also promote strong business and community network within our membership across Canada through our various programs. HKCBA is truly a national and, dare I say, international organization, as I'm speaking to you from Montreal, and I know many of our attendees are connecting from Vancouver and late night from Asia. We have 8 chapters across Canada, including Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, and Atlantic. I will begin my introduction with Monsieur Olivier Brault, qui se joint à nous de Chine. En effet, Olivier est installé en Chine depuis 14 ans. Auparavant, il a étudié en génie informatique à l'Université McGill avant de devenir directeur général pour l'Asie-Pacifique chez Suprema depuis 8 ans. Il a participé à bâtir les plus grosses usines du monde en Chine, dont Tesla à Shanghai, BMW et Evergrande. Olivier est administrateur de la Chambre de commerce Canada, le CanCam, à Shanghai. Another speaker joining us from around the world, this time from Thailand, is Mr. Jamie Kerr, a member of our HKCBA Montreal Board of Directors and owner and founder of Fabco Customs Inc. and Clean Limited. Fabco is a Montreal, Asia, China-based custom manufacturer, and their factories use North American standards and processes that are ideally suited for international, Canadian, and US markets. Fabco is specialized in metal fabrication and wood products. We are HKCBA, so obviously one of our panelists is from Hong Kong, Mr. David Chan. Dr. Chan is an engineer with expertise in energy, indoor health, comfort, and facility management, and is the founder and director of Negawatt Utility Limited, whose aim to use his expertise to combine information technology to assist building industry achieve higher sustainability with the growing demand for higher efficiency in buildings. He has a degree in engineering and as well as in architecture. One of his iconic projects is the design of a cooling water system with plate exchanger within the new tallest building in Beijing, the Z15 CBD Tower. Having joined Brevia since June 2015, Ms. Irene Peng is a Vice President, Corporate Affairs and Assistant to CEO and President of Brevia Group. She assists the CEO and President to oversee all major projects invested, developed, and managed by the Brevia Group. Irene leads the corporate affairs and manages investors' relations, and actively participates in project acquisition, conception, development, and brand building of Brevia. Called to the New York and Ontario bars and qualified in China, Irene is an experienced corporate lawyer. And before joining Brevia, she has worked as a lawyer in international law firms in Asia. She worked on many cross-border transactions as a lawyer and being a large-scale or complex instructor. Irene is interested in the industry regulatory matters and is a member of the board of directors of the Urban Development Institute of Quebec. Last but definitely not least, Mr. Robert Weinberg holds a bachelor's degree in urban planning from Concordia University and is a fully licensed general contractor in the province of Quebec. Prior to joining Broccolini in 2017 as a director of real estate development, Robert was the director of Canada's largest real estate firms, where he had held a multidisciplinary role in leasing and development. During this time, Robert successfully closed 3 of Montreal's largest leasing transactions, and with many years of experience, and helped launch the company's data center group. Robert also spent his 7 years developing specialty industrial buildings throughout Canada, and he has a true love and passion for the real estate that transcends not only his career, but his life. Having grown up in a real estate family, Robert began his career actually as a site sweeper, learning each facet of the industry over the years, and he understands and respects the value of the quality and integrity of every facet of a project and works with his team to ensure that performance benchmark is to exceed expectation every time. So before we begin, HKCBA is once again very thankful for our partners and sponsors, Broccolini, Brivia Group, and DS Lawyers, as well as our media partner, bâtiments. On a personal note, I had an incredible time working with the panelists to prepare for this webinar. I cannot wait for our panelists to share their rich knowledge with all of you. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So Olivier, having been in China for over a decade and seeing the incredible development of major cities in China, including namely Shanghai, can you speak about its real estate development and evolution, and namely with the use of innovative, environmentally friendly building products such as roofing, membranes, isolation blocks?
Well, thank you, Cindy. I've been in China for 15 years and in the roofing sector for about 10 years. And I cover the whole Asia Pacific region. So I can see from this region that there's actually 2 poles driving innovation right now. One is China and the other one is Singapore. And they're really driving in completely different ways, but it's they're self-enriching. So if I have time to talk about Singapore, I will after my presentation. Otherwise, I'll focus mostly on China. Is that China is really a cost-driven market. Okay, so it's hyper-competitive. There's let's say, just to give an example, in Canada there might be 5 major roofing companies, but in China there are 500. So this is created because the whole market was built on, the whole mechanism of the market was built to alleviate poverty in China. So there's very little barriers to entry. Even the associations of manufacturers, they're there to promote more and more competition between the players. So in order to survive with so many players, the focus is always to drive costs down. So over the years, manufacturers, what they did to drive costs down, they turned to recycled material content. So right now, the companies are getting bigger and bigger, and they have full R&D centers with hundreds of researchers just trying different recycled materials. And they even build their own processing facilities where they can refine all of those recycled materials to make this more pure so that they can improve the quality. So in the past, they used to import all those recycled content from, let's say, USA, from Europe, but in 2000, I'm not exactly sure, I think it's 2018 January, there was a new policy, the national sword policy they call this, where they completely blocked all the import of these recycled content. So why did they do this? Because in the West, there is not good filtering facilities for all these recycled material, while in China, they are very professional and very organized at, let's say, scavenging, separating, and purifying all of these recycled. So in China, when you tear down a residential facility, let's say, which maybe might be 50 years old, there is an army of industrial scavengers that will go and separate each material from the building. So the level of purity that you can get is you can get to a specialized trader and find, sorry, you can find protective corners of refrigerators, let's say, grinded. So it's only one type of material. You can find, let's say, shower curtains grinded, at a trader. So you can use recycled material in very innovative ways in China for construction materials just because of this whole ecosystem that is happening. But let's say this goes down all the way to residential buildings, because in residential buildings, you have scavengers coming in and filtering your garbage for you, which is what is not happening in North America. So China market has been for 20 years the leader of not only recycled material usage, but also a full life cycle management. Except in China, they never marketed this as green material. They marketed this as a strategy to survive. So of course, there's been some consequences in using materials at the beginning because the research centers of Chinese companies were not fully developed. So, but the good thing about this is that there was trial and error that happened over the last 20 years, and now is emerging new types of materials that are much more resistant to wear and tear. Of course, a lot of mistakes, but this all happened in China. So my conclusion from this is that from us, people, let's say in Canada, business people in Canada, we can take advantage of all of this innovation that happened because, let's say with the help of professionals, what we can do is we can figure out which ones that were successful in the last 10 years and make collaboration to really make use of these, let's say, greener materials that are coming in from China. Okay, so maybe people will say, well, we don't know what's in the content and what's happening, and Chinese materials might be lower quality. In the next 5 years, there's huge push from the government to improve quality of material coming from China. First, it was fire safety. That was the first push. Second was environmental protection, because as we saw in the news in China, let's say 10 years ago, was very polluted. So they focused a lot on improving the quality and the environmental friendliness of manufacturing processes. Now the focus is on healthy buildings. So what they call green in China is actually healthy buildings. So those healthy buildings is to make sure there's no pollutants inside the materials that are used, let's say in paints, in carpets, and this is very important. So soon the next laws that will come will be on performance. So let's say roofing, there will be a national law, I think this year, that will come out where roofing for government buildings needs to withstand 25 years. So they're catching up very, very quickly. They're not yet at energy saving, okay? So because the energy is subsidized in China, so this is not yet the focus, but this is something that will happen quite quickly. So there's a lot to say about China. So I notice my time is up. So maybe in the Q&A, we can talk about Singapore also, which is completely different because Singapore has is constrained by lack of resources. So they really focus on resource saving and space utilization, which is a totally different ballgame, but they benefit from the low cost of the materials that are coming from China as well to drive their development. So thank you very much for this moment.
Olivier, thank you for sharing your insights. It's really incredible to see, the advances that have been done in China and in Asia, generally speaking, with these green, innovative building products. I'll definitely have a lot of questions for you in the Q&A period. Turning over to Jamie, you founded Fabco, a manufacturer based in Montreal, and making metal fabrication and wood products. Have you seen an increase in the demand of such innovative green products mentioned by Olivier?
So we've been in China for 22 years now. It's quite a long time. I was listening to Olivier carefully because I've seen firsthand exactly what he's talking about. The scavenging that is done on a work site is incredible. The way that everything gets separated into its own little pile, and by the end of the day, it's all gone off to its own destination to be recycled into. Wrought iron is recycled with wrought iron. Wood is recycled with wood, and so on. So my customers are in Europe and United States and Canada, and they're all very concerned about what is in the product that they're making, where before they never were. Before they just said, I'd like some galvanized steel, or I am making a forged steel wheel. And they said, what kind of steel is it? C45 is a standard construction steel that they use. They didn't really care what was on the inside. Now, the customer is demanding a full report from a metallurgist on exactly what is the content of every single product that we are shipping out of China and out of Thailand. So it's no longer just make something and have it at a good price. Now it's make something with the correct materials and have it certified also at the right price, which China has allowed us to do that. In what Olivier was saying is that, you know, they recycled out of necessity, not because it was a green thing to do. They recycled out of a cost necessity. And now you can actually tell on the recycled product that you're making exactly what's in the product, and it's certified, and you don't have to sort of scratch your head and wonder why. It's a very interesting crossroad at the supply and demand sort of area of sort of the world economics. You know, now general population actually cares exactly what's in their drywall, what's in their roofing product, what's in their membranes, what's in the plywood. We are quite a large supplier of plywood. It matters now. Before it was, do you want 7-ply plywood or 5-ply? And is it flat? Is it construction grade, or is it this? Now it's, is it birch and eucalyptus? What is on the inside of it? Where was the birch wood? Where does it come from? Is it recycled birch? Is it fresh birch? What is the certificate report on plywood? I mean, before, not even 3 years ago, it was just plywood. Now it's a specific thing, and that's been driven by the customer throughout the world. And now we are able to supply that and supply everything in an orderly fashion. You know, it's changed dramatically, even from 3 years ago. Our plywood fabricator, who is in just a little northeast of Beijing, they've even come up with a product that they're selling now that is a hybrid of a cement plywood sheet that's being used in Europe as construction material, that is completely recycled, and they're using it as because it's only 5/8 of an inch thick, and it's extremely strong. This is something, you know, we never even saw that before. You know, it's and when I did see it, it was too expensive to use, so we never, you know, none of my customers really wanted it. And that's sort of the evolution of what's happened over the last 10 years. 20 years ago, it was even, you know, it was even more of a free-for-all as far as whatever the materials were. That's the biggest difference is people actually care. The customer cares what it is that they are making, what it is that their product is made out of. They really do care, which is great. Helps the world.
Yes, Jamie, and you know, I understand also that you know, customers care, and obviously health is definitely at the priority of everyone's thoughts right now. Like I mentioned before, you also founded Clean Limited, and as the name suggests, manufactures products that cleans and purifies air, including HEPA filters. Obviously, this is important for real estate developments, especially during COVID times. Can you describe some of the products currently manufactured by yourself or that are in demand, as well as outlook for the future?
So another subject that Olivier touched on was the environment of what is changing in the environment. And a lot in China, a lot worldwide actually, what is changing is the air that you breathe. And there's a lot of buildings that have open windows, but the open air windows in some Asian countries, the air is worse than the air on the inside of the building. So how do you clean the inside of the building and clean the air, and how do you measure it? So there has been a leaps and bounds even in the last 12 months on how to clean air, mostly because of COVID. So it's not a good thing that we have a pandemic, but it's actually a great push for innovation as far as clean air solutions. We have machines that we build that are air filtration machines that have 3 layers of filtration plus UVC lights and actually capture air. So they pull air in from the environment and push it out on the bottom, and will cycle a room's air every 3 minutes to make it pure. I mean, but really pure, beyond the PM 2.5, which is an air purification measurement tool that the general population uses. But with a HEPA filter and the refinement of the membrane that goes in the HEPA filter, it's called the medium. With the refinement of the medium, you can actually truly clean a room. So the machines that we make are mostly for dental offices, medical purposes. It's an industrial machine, but meant for public areas. The innovation that's coming on this is that they're using what's called bipolar ionization mixed with a filtration machine. Now this takes it even to a higher level, and the ionization is positive and negative ions that are thrown out into the atmosphere that are charged, that take the dust particles and attract them to each other, so they become larger than 2.5 microns, and they fall out of suspension, and your air is purified. Well, they fall out of suspension, and the machines that we're making capture what has fallen out of suspension and filter it. So it's really pure. The interesting thing is that with 5G and 6G networks, 6G is the next wave of networks that are being used currently in Korea and where it's being developed, and some places in China. But a 5G network will allow your air purification machines to talk to each other and say, you're doing a bad job at this end of the building, amp up the power a little bit and bring it off at this end, or create an airflow that will allow you to filter particles throughout a building, wherever the building is. And this technology, 3 years ago was a dream, and now it's a reality, and buildings, closed window buildings, are using these kinds of systems, and remotely the machines are talking to each other and remotely filtering the air and cleaning the air so that the entire environment is good enough. This is a great thing for COVID. keeps you staying. Well, you stay inside, and your air is pure.
And I think that that's actually what Jamie, you're talking about, changes caused by the pandemic. Dr. Chan has both academic and practical experience in the industry, and has been, working to make a better urban environment, and namely by limiting the spreads of diseases in densely populated cities such as Hong Kong. Perhaps I could ask Dr. Chan to elaborate a little bit on this.
Thank you, Cindy. Cindy. Yes, Hong Kong is a very densely populated area, especially where we have one of the city with the highest amount of high-rise buildings. So it is very easy with 7 million and 8 million people just living very closely and working really closely together. Especially we have to sit together within 90% of our time together at the same time. So with this change is caused by the pandemic is actually a new normal, where we more rely on technology to identify what's going on. Instead of we walk around like in the conventional approach before 2000, we started to adopt a lot more new technologies like cloud system, AI, deployment of IoT sensors to make it easier and more cost effective for continuously monitoring, to make sure that we identify if anything goes wrong immediately, like if anyone gets a fever before they actually enter a building, to reduce the risk of actually having COVID being passed over. Fortunately, I don't know if it's fortunate or not, but during this 2019-2020 COVID period, because we had an experience in the past back in 2003 during the SARS, we actually more careful. We actually become very careful on how we actually come into contact with other people. So the technology side will actually helped us to actually realize what's going on in a much faster rate. So in the past, we rely on paper documentation to identify if the building is in good design. For example, the toilet system is a drainage system is in good shape. Obviously, back in the time, no one cares in the past, even though we have some green building assessment to assess over different aspects of building performance, like site area or wastage or water use or IEQ monitoring. But nowadays, we actually with technology, with an easier information management system, we can get to know our building easier and quicker. For example, like I mentioned early on, before 2003, we don't know the drainage system is actually not so good because we don't have the U-trap in one of the sites at Moy Garden. That's the lack of U-trap causes the quick epidemic or outbreak back in 2003, causing a lot of people get sick when someone at the lower level passes over the virus up to the higher level. And with technology and with IoT solutions and information that actually we be able to allow building owner to track over using our platform, the platform that we developed, is easier for the building owner to find these things quicker, and it make a big drastic change in the daily operation of building management. So I think this new normal would actually help to reduce the risk of COVID outbreak and help to bring a better future to not just us, and also help our corporate different developers around the world, and especially in Hong Kong, to make a better, safer environment for building occupants.
Yes, David, thank you for sharing. And you're just talking about, future trends. Can you enlighten us about this digital transformation that you talked about for smart buildings? And you're talking about how it helps, obviously, individuals, but also perhaps, like you mentioned briefly on it, developers and also property owners. I know, for instance, you have spoken about using cloud computing and artificial intelligence and energy management optimization for air conditioning systems. So I don't know if you could elaborate a bit on that.
Yeah, okay, thank you. We have been developing artificial intelligence back in 2016, and since then we actually have established a platform with over 20 plus big data analytic with AI. We're talking about random tree forest technique and different kinds like the random forest, light gradient boosting approach that we actually been using those. Those actually help us to use all these AI model to tap into our existing building control system in buildings all over the Hong Kong, and able to help them to realize and quicker and faster instead of the conventional Excel approach, because there's just so many data in a building, and we cannot just use our eyeball to realize what is going on with just human naked eyes. So with computation improvement, we actually identify quicker. We can help our client to make it easier to realize how much energy potential in their daily operation. We actually help them to save over 10% of the building energy use. So after our success, actually many of our clients, like many of the major developers in Hong Kong, like Sun Hung Kai Properties, Sino, Swire, and so many other any building developers, starting to use our platform to help them to monitor the energy use, to actually identify more saving opportunity for them. That's actually help them to bring value to their property as well. Because they have to use it for ESG and CSR purposes, which is in Hong Kong, listed company are actually a compulsory issue. So we'll help them to find ways to improve their property values by improving the corporate values. And so I'm sure this is a game-changing technology, and so we can actually deploy more as we deploy more energy saving opportunities in these kind of area, the same AI methodology will also move towards how to improve the indoor environmental quality as well, and especially on also other areas such as site use and how resource use, like what Oliver and Jamie have been talking about, plywood and also other material use, for a life cycle analysis as well, which help buildings to achieve even higher sustainability level for the corporates.
Wow, that's it. It's really, really incredible to hear, our panelists speak, and from the building products to how it provides developers and property owners with concrete added value and obviously some business advantages as well. Robert, now being the Director of Real Estate Development at Broccolini, can you tell us a little bit about how sustainability factors into a commercial real estate development project?
Yeah, so if you look at tenants that are out there in today's market, and this was started probably 7 or 8 years ago with maybe a little bit longer, with the flight towards quality, where you were starting to look at LEED buildings, energy efficient buildings, etc. But it was only really the biggest firms that would mandate that as being a requirement, and it was more for the PR side versus the health and safety and environmental benefit in a building. So LEED would be leaders in energy efficient design, BOMA is an operating platform, and related groups. What COVID has allowed is the acceleration of the mindset of people want an environment where they feel good, where they feel safe, and where they're happy to come to work. So in the last number of years, we've seen companies go out of their way to put in relaxation rooms, massage therapy rooms, ping pong tables, whatever it is, all sorts of stuff that makes it a little bit more exciting to come to work, and what separates your office from others, because now employees are interviewing their employers as much as the employer is interviewing the employees. What COVID has allowed, it's more of the flight towards quality from the flight to amenities. So if you start to look at what's going on in these new buildings, they're much more efficient energy-wise, much cleaner air. And look, cleaner air in a building, there's a million studies to prove that if you have cleaner, fresher air in a building, there's less sick days, less people tired at the end of the day, productivity goes up, absenteeism goes down. I mean, across the board, it's fantastic. And it means that if somebody comes in with a cold, the odds are the entire floor isn't going to get wiped out with a cold the next day. So, what we're trying to do now is make sure that all of our buildings on the commercial side, as they come out, are as advanced as you can make them, not just today, but for the future with what we can plan for. None of us expected a pandemic, but here we are. So we're learning as we go. But we're making sure that we have the best in class air intake in the city, because as good as all your systems are, if you're only recycling air, you're limited. We're putting operable windows and balconies. We're making sure that there's water filtration within the floor. So instead of people bringing in their plastic bottles, they can go to central plants and go refill their water bottles with, as pure of a water as you can get. And, like Jamie had mentioned with the ionization, where we're installing ionization technology into our buildings to make sure that they don't propagate illness, but that they provide that environment where people, as they're starting to go back to work, say, I want to be in that building. And if you start to look at a lot of companies, what they started to do, at least the ones that can afford to undertake the studies, is they say, what's my increase in rent going to be to go into a much better building? Because it's a real number that hits the bottom line. The flip side is you do the math and say, how many days per employee am I losing because they're getting sick, because they're not productive, because of the building they're in? And the math speaks for itself. It's better to have a flight towards quality. So we're putting in all the technology that we can. And as COVID evolves, it allows us to evolve a little bit more quickly and adopt the new technologies which are being proven. The good news is Canada lags a little bit behind the other countries. So we get to watch the US and the Asian countries and some of the Europeans test it first. And then we can go pick the one that pencils out the best.
Thank you. Thank you for telling us about the innovations and the transformation that's happening in the commercial side. I'd like to hear from Irene, who's the Vice President of Corporate Affairs at Brivia, to tell us a little bit about the sustainability factors into residential and mixed-use real estate development projects.
Thank you, Cindy. It's very interesting to hear our panelists today because real estate, like any other business, right? We share a lot of similarities across the globe, regardless of the geographic location. However, it is very much a local business and has its local social context. So it's important, I think, before I dive into answering this question, to say that there's quite a bit of difference in the background, the historic and social background in sustainability in China or other parts of Asia, Southeast Asia, and here in North America, because typically in a country like China, the large cities like Shanghai, Beijing, Hong Kong, and other parts of the large cities, there's a mass production approach in the real estate development. I mean, a real estate development there, we're talking about 20, 30 buildings, while as a large development here, you're talking about 2-3 buildings. That's pretty significant already. And also the dense population there in the large cities allocated in a different way than here in North America. While as here, we typically, we are more of a lifestyle on the car. So you typically in the past have residences more spread out in the suburbs, and downtown Montreal is more of an exception to the rule, but typically a downtown North American city is like a donut. In the night, there's not many residents living in the downtown core. So it's very much a recent trend in North America that we started to see the population living in downtown core started to grow in the last 10 to 15 years. So the reason why I'm talking about this is because we, as a developer that have a large portfolio in downtown Montreal, and we're now also in Toronto and other parts of Canada, we have seen very importantly, one of the features about sustainability in real estate development is actually the low-tech way, which is the recreation of green space. Because a lot of the large developments here, before they become high-rise condominiums or high-rise mixed-use or office building, is typically a surface parking lot, really. So it is very much a complaint for the residents in downtown that they don't have enough green space. There's not many trees. There's not many city parks for their kids to play in. And what we have done as a developer, again, focused very much in the urban and densified projects to recreate those green space in our projects. One of our flagship projects, YUL, for example, is in the downtown core in the west side of downtown. We actually have a 23,000 square feet in the project courtyard. So this is something that's really rare and really much needed for downtown, because it's not only providing very livable environment for our residents, but also create an environment that would reduce the heat island effects and promote better water absorption, and really a very important feature in the sustainability development philosophy. Sometimes, we're restricted by the space, so you have to be creative. Don't necessarily have 23,000 square feet on the ground in order to put in a garden. So what you have seen in many of our projects is also the creation of a sky garden, for the residents to hang out on the Basileia, or even sometimes, for example, in our new project, 1 Phillips Square, we'll have a sky garden on the 55th floor. So that is something that's spectacular for the residents to enjoy the skyline of the city, but meanwhile, it's really an important sustainable initiative. And of course, like my fellow panelist has mentioned, there's many smart building technology now that you can adopt. There's green construction material or equipment that you can adopt. Like a lot of our buildings have a smart window system that would reflect the lights, and also we have the cooling and heating system in our buildings to recuperate the heat that's excessive from particular condo units, and use that in the central system. So we've been using quite a lot of the more or less conventional or some more cutting edge technologies in our sustainable initiative. But what I thought important to mention is really this so-called low-tech way of sustainability that's equally important.
Thank you, Irene. I think you, both Rob and Irene mentioned it, and how innovative and smart real estate projects benefit developers such as Rocklini and Rivia. Can you also maybe elaborate a little bit more on how, Rob, how it benefits commercial end users? Like I know you briefly touched upon it with, you know, as a cost-benefit analysis. I don't know if you can elaborate a little bit more on that.
So in terms of a cost-benefit analysis, a lot of it comes down to productivity and sick days. So, you know, you can take all the great office towers that were built in the 80s and 90s, but by 3 o'clock, the oxygen levels are low. There's a lot of carbon dioxide. There's other illnesses that are in the air, and that just gets recycled through the system. And that causes, you know, at the end of the day, you're yawning or you're wiping your eyes or you can't focus. And these are real items that have been measured and are proven to exist. You know, on top of that, you start to look at, you know, when you're trying to attract employees, if you want to attract the best, they have options. The best employees out there can walk into, you know, especially in today's real estate market that's very hot. You know, if you're good, you can go into any shop you want. So then you have to decide, well, who do I want to work for? What is it that they're providing to me? Which is not the way it used to be when we were all starting out our careers. I have to assume we're all give or take-ish the same age. You know, you walked in and you took the job that was available because you really wanted the job and to grow your career. So that's a relatively new school of thought where everyone is, you know, you're being interviewed on both sides. And if you can provide a space where people feel good about coming in, the health and wellness is a priority of the company, that tells the employee that that they care, you know, and it's tangible. You can look at it, you can feel it. And typically the buildings that have better performance on the mechanical, electrical, and health safety side also have companies in them that are providing other health benefits. They're doing exercise programs, diet programs, food service, et cetera. So you start to create that ecosystem. You have a lot of like minds within the project. And you wind up having an organism that grows on its own of just like-minded people under the same roof. And that just, you know, it picks up momentum and you wind up with a phenomenal environment. The challenge is that this is usually reserved for whoever can afford to pay the highest rent. So I think what we're going to see coming out of COVID, and I guess we've been trending that way, is the big companies are going to be in phenomenal spaces and their competitive advantage is going to be leaps and bounds above what the others can touch, because the old buildings are very hard to convert. You know, building built in 1985, that's fully built out of offices now. If you want to upgrade all the systems, you have to completely demolish everything on the inside and empty the building. Not a lot of groups I know, maybe you guys can interrupt me if you know otherwise, are prepared to empty out an entire office building and renovate for a year and give up all that rent and write off whatever improvements have been made. I think you're also going to see a lot more shorter office buildings coming out of COVID. And how long that lasts, I don't know, but I believe in low-rise office. Put the residents above, put the office down below so you can use the stairs and you have a bit more of that human scale, less vertical transportation challenges. So we're working on that now. And then to Irene's point, because, you know, we're doing some stuff that's similar to them with trying to create more livable environments in urban cores. As an urban planner, I look at the downtown cores of Montreal and you say, well, up until a few years ago, no one lived there. So you build all these services for the office buildings, and at night they're empty and the sewers aren't being used, the sidewalks aren't being used. So you wind up having to double everything because whatever is not being used in the core is being used in the suburbs. So by creating these mixed use areas, you can get a much more efficient use of all the infrastructure, and you can start investing more heavily in the green, in the health, in the leisure and whatever else you want to call it. And that ties back into the sustainable part of downtown, making it a sustainable, livable city.
Thank you, Rob. I'll turn it over to Irene to talk a little bit about how these smart residential projects benefit developers like Rivia, but also the end users and residents at the end of the day.
Right, I very much agree with what Robert has mentioned at the end of what he just said, which is in that I think compared to Asia or other very much large population cities, you know, you have the usage there, so you can afford to have more of the more expensive way to resolve a problem while it's here, because the usage is not quite there yet. So we have to find a solution to be cost effective in providing some of the solutions that to resolve the challenges that we're facing. For sure, for the smart buildings, I think my fellow panelist has addressed that question pretty well from their perspective, from more of a technicality perspective. For us, for sure, smart buildings is a really great way for us to manage the building efficiency and energy consumption, which translate directly to economic benefits, not just for the developer, but also very much for tenants, like Robert has mentioned, in commercial buildings, also tenants in the residential buildings, and also, you know, the ultimate condo owners in a condominium building. And the other aspect for us as a predominantly residential and mixed-use developer is also the comfort. Very much similar to Robert has mentioned in today's environment, you know, like while the real estate markets in Montreal is in its very good shape, it's still a seller's market, but we see the buyers are getting more sophisticated. They compare very much the comfort level, the amenity level of each building is no longer just you have a location, then you can sell. It's very much about the kind of development philosophy, the amenity, the comfort that you provide. So smart building has become one of the important features in many of our buildings, such as, the smart home system. Oftentimes right now you're keyless, or you at least have the option of bringing your key or not bringing your key. And you can control most of the features in your home through your mobile phone, because we know that the new generation, our generation, a generation that's younger, actually very much rely on the use of their smartphone. So a lot of the home features, the appliances, your lights, you name it, you can all control it through the appliance application on your mobile phone. The other thing that a lot of people are talking about right now, and we have started to incorporate that in our buildings, is the smart parcel delivery system. Because even before the pandemic, a lot of the building that's older, that's built in the early 2000s or in the 90s, started to have a problem because you have so many packages deliver, you know, all the food delivery, and also the online grocery shopping, or the Amazons and the whatnots. They have been all receiving this large quantity of parcels, while as the buildings were not necessarily designed with a system that can really handle this. So we started to look into this a few years ago, and in our up and coming projects, such as again, One Phillips Square, we'll have a smart parcel delivery management system, so that the residents can have a secure place where it will be managed in a efficient way, so that they have the flexibility of retrieving their package, and that would also include some food items that might be perishable. So these are the things that we've been looking into, to use the smart building technologies to not only make the building cost effective or energy effective, but also make the life quality of our residents even better.
Thank you, Irene. I'll finish the panel with one more question before we go dive into the Q&A period for Irene and Rob. I'm hearing you both speak, and I'm hearing these real estate projects go beyond just the building itself and the hardware, but it seems to be like a philosophy for creating a little bit like our conference name, Future Cities. Can you both maybe discuss a little bit about making a positive environmental impact in these development projects, and how it extends to also social factors as well? I know you both have touched upon it as well. Rob, I'll let you start.
Look, I think that there's a few parts to that question. I think the future of cities goes, it's no longer just the developer developing their project and plunking it down and saying, here you go, this is our offering. Things have to tie in, and they're trending to that direction. They have to tie in with the urban fabric, with the community. And will there always be the developer against the city or some of the social groups? Yeah, there's always going to be the headbutting, but there has to be much more of that open dialogue and understanding that you can't just do what you want. And also you have to make sure, what are you contributing to the city other than this tower? Because if the mindset is, I'm building this because people need houses and I'm leaving, probably not the best way to look at it. Same with offices. If you're just plunking a generic office building down, same story. I think so. It's a lot to do with just being smarter. It's being smarter in how we govern ourselves and how we pick and develop our projects. And then it's about, smarter technology. So if you look at an office building, almost half the cost these days in a new building is your operating expenses and taxes. Taxes, that's the city's part, but operating expenses is major dollars. What David was mentioning, you can save 10% on your on your utility bills. In Quebec, we've largely ignored that forever because power is cheap. And when power is cheap, there's no reason to find a way to save. Lots of materials on site have been wasted because as those materials were cheap, why send someone down to recuperate them? We weren't doing it the right way, but we didn't know any other way. So, just like from what I understand, because I don't know, but from where Asia went to the direction of we're recuperating out of necessity, we're starting to do so here out of necessity and responsibility. But the more smart integration you can have where you have buildings talking to each other, where you can take the waste heat from one building and use it to heat another building. Look at data centers. We build data centers, they take all the heat, they dump it outside and reject it. Maybe there's a better technology we can use to do heat recovery that doesn't negatively impact one versus the other. That's the tip of the iceberg with it. But, we're talking to different AI companies that have technology that go in that run your whole building operating system. And they'll monitor when people come and go, when to make the building warmer, colder, how to time it in line with when the sun hits the wall. This is all fantastic technology. And we all say to ourselves, well, I can't believe we're not doing this, but still we're not doing it. And very few people are doing it. So the market in general needs to adopt and needs to start thinking beyond the edge of your nose and look 10 years down the line, what's our imprint? What are we leaving behind here?
Yes, I really see that long-term vision. Irene, do you have a few words you wanted to add on this subject, more perhaps from a residential perspective?
Right, very quickly, I agree with Robert in that today, when we talk about future cities, when we talk about development or responsible development, it's really not just a single developer's endeavor. It's very much a collaboration. It's in the ecosystem, especially now that every pair of eyes on downtown, and we're talking about the future of downtown, the future of the cities. Are we going to have a fundamental, is it paradigm shifting? Are we going to have a fundamental different way of living? I think the silver lining of pandemic is that it makes us rethink about the way that we do development, but I think it's also, we should all bear in mind that a lot of the trends actually started well before the pandemic, such as the densification of some of the more traditionally suburban area. You see that trend started quite a few years ago, and the discussion of the connection between real estate development and mobility. And the Urban Development Institute, with which I'm part of the board of directors, and Brivia and other developers such as Broccolini heavily involved in. We are in constant discussions with municipalities. We're doing our research, and we are trying to find a way that would develop in a way that's systematic, that would respond to the sustainable lifestyle. Which in a lot of sense means connectivity, right? Like Robert has already mentioned, oftentimes the mixed use development actually is a very much responsible way to develop, because you have the amenities around you, you have all the convenience. And I know that a lot of people are talking about a 15-minute city nowadays, that you can walk to all you need within 15-minute walk. I think downtown actually traditionally have that cluster of resources, and you see that now a lot of the suburban centers have started to have that cluster of resources as well. So I think as a developer, we are watching the trend very closely, and we're placing ourselves in a position that will continue to focus on the transit-oriented development. And what we are also aiming to do is to actually develop our projects or buildings in a way that our amenities are really designed for the residents. It's not just about looking pretty, it's also about creating spaces where they want to hang out, they want to be together. I think we always have to bear in mind that the pandemic is going to be over one day, and we crave for human connectivity. I wish today that we are seeing each other face to face, and we can hang out with our conference attendees after this panel discussion, and we can have spontaneous discussion and stimulating intellectual exchange in person. So nothing can replace in-person meeting, and we always have to bear that in mind. And I think our amenities have to be designed in a way that's flexible, and better air quality is always good, pandemic or not. So these are the things that I think Brivia has been doing well before the pandemic, and we'll continue to do that. And I am very glad to see a lot of other developers in Montreal, again, such as Broccolini, have also been doing such great things to our city.
So
Thank
you were
you.
saying about, Robert, you were saying about things that you wish would happen, and maybe the buildings could talk to each other and use these things. Well, the technology is actually, and a very good point was that the people who would pay the rent. Well, Singapore is a place where they can pay the rent. It's a very wealthy island nation, and they have made unbelievable advances. Isn't that correct, Olivier?
Yeah, I do believe that necessity drives innovation even faster than responsibility. So in Singapore, they just have no space. So they have to manage and be creative to make space. So just an example, now they have no more land, so they have to build underground, but nobody wants to live underground. So there's a research institute that is working to develop artificial light that mimics a natural light up to, let's say, 6 stories down. And they want to make livable space that are underground. Also, Irene was talking about sky gardens. You know, in Singapore, they've been, for 15 years, there's been sky gardens over there. They even have trees now planted on balconies. So they have these buildings that are just look like forests, and they have side of buildings that are totally livable surface for plants. So the whole skyscraper is a plant garden. And Irene also mentioned like recuperation of water is, you know, sponge city is law now in Singapore because of flash floods that are happening. So every new building needs to build water reservoirs that can retain water and not discharge it, so that you can reuse it for maybe for other uses. So Singapore is really ahead of this, and it's continuing to innovate and pushing us material manufacturers to deliver new products.
Right.
Well,
Olivier, just very quickly, I lived in Singapore before, and I was actually proposing to have trees on the terrace or balcony with my colleagues, and my construction colleague looked at me and kind of just reminded me that we have minus 30-degree winter here in Montreal. So I think I'll just end like that.
Christmas trees.
You got to pick the right tree. You just have to pick the right tree. In Seoul, they have a sky garden, but the sky garden is actually a full 60-story building that provides food, and all they grow is food in this entire building. And I happened to walk by the building and go, oh, what is this? And looked up, and I couldn't believe it. And it's a sustainable industry. It's a sky farm built out of a 60-story building. It's just amazing what's going on these days.
Yeah, absolutely. I think rooftop garden, edible garden is what they call it sometimes. It's certainly something that we're watching very closely.
Yeah, I think if you look at the way we govern ourselves here as, you know, as a, call it North American society, especially Canadian society, if the government doesn't if Hydro-Quebec doesn't get behind it like they've done with a lot of the other programs, if Gaz Métro, or now it's Énergir, when those groups get behind it and create the incentives that allow the developers and the builders and the users to get compensation, or at least help with the cost of the capital cost of doing these projects, they get done. But otherwise, no one wants to be the first to do it, because if you're wrong, your project is no longer viable. Because the margins and the spread is very, very thin here in terms of where you get to a good project that's profitable, or a project where you now have to redesign it because you can't find a tenant to pay that extra dollar, because you're probably already charging the maximum or a little bit above. So that the equilibrium point here is very, very fine. And if you have, you know, Hydro-Quebec for years has done all sorts of grant programs where they offset the cost of your capital by switching to an electric furnace versus gas or oil or whatever. So I think we're going to need to see a bit more of a top-down approach in order to get especially some of the older buildings up to snuff, and then the newer buildings to adopt that last little bit of technology to make them as close to perfect as we're going to get in this market.
So I see that we are past the 10 o'clock. I don't know if I could keep you guys for a few more minutes, as we do have questions coming in, and we'll dive right into the Q&A section from the audience. I have a question. How does and I think, Rob, you're talking a little bit about that, and I think it's perfect. How does all of this become affordable? What model can translate infrastructure saving to the city due to the density to lower cost to tenants and owners?
Wow. So, look, I think it becomes affordable. So there's a few parts. I think it becomes affordable when the government gets involved and creates a program or subventions, cost offsets for the capital cost, because a lot of this equipment is capital intensive. So look at the equipment that Jamie's talking about that filters the air. So what's the health benefit of keeping all those people from getting sick with whatever's in the air? What's the impact on the healthcare system? Is it measurable? I don't know. It's really not my field of expertise. If you can save 10 or 15% of your energy usage in an office building because office buildings waste power, I mean, what's the impact? Now you're building less substations, you're running less cable, you don't need to build another dam, you don't need to put up another hydro plant. So, each of these little steps has, did I just cut out?
Yes, you cut out a little bit. You're good.
I swear I paid my internet bill.
Yeah,
so
Cindy was editing it. It's okay.
Yeah, so I think if you look at it, all these different avenues you can take have second and third round effects. There's probably someone out there much smarter than me who can study what the true either dollar value or health value is to either society or to the city. Look at Irene, look at what we're doing with the Brivia, Broccolini, and some other developers are doing more mixed use. Now you're not building, you're building one set of roads for twice as many people, arguably, because you have activity downtown all day long. You're putting in one light rail station. That metro station that used to only be busy during the rush hours is now busy day through night because you have a human population there 24 hours a day. So many variables I can't guess how you do it, but every change we make has a massive impact as it goes down the chain. I mean, I'm trying to think of the math in my head, but just nothing.
I have another question here coming in. What are the current challenges you're facing in the raising demand for AI and internet and IoT technologies? What is your approach to the global market? And I think that this question is directed to Dr. Chan.
Hi. I think the current challenges that we're actually facing now is, especially in Hong Kong, is the cost effectiveness of the AI and IoT technologies. We are challenged by two things. Buildings are actually high rise, so you need to deploy a lot of IoT sensors all around the buildings to actually get a feel of what's going on, while at the same time, electricity is actually cost-wise is rather low comparatively in Hong Kong compared to different overseas countries. But luckily, because our team is actually very strong in the engineering background, especially in the building services, we'll be able to help our client really quickly to pinpoint area of interest, or maybe the severe area, and then to give them a fast payback solutions using our AI analytic. And at the same time proving. So how come we have so many buildings right now in Hong Kong? Is because we're able to help them to save energy. We're actually able to help the frontline engineers to identify what is going on in the building, and we'll be able to tap into different systems to compare, to help them to reduce time of finding solutions, and especially we do not create any adverse impact to our building occupants. So because if tenants complain, we're in trouble. So we help them to maintain the comfort as a really crucial point while we do energy saving, and we have been very successful in that. With overseas, as for approach to global market, we actually expanding our platform over in the Southeast Asia at the moment. We work together with different people already at the overseas countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, even in China, we have partners. So we work together, apply our technologies to help them which is to deploy our platform and tapping into the existing hardware, or maybe even we can actually help them to deploy hardware to help them to find a solution to actually achieve energy saving while maintaining the indoor comfort at very fast payback solutions. I hope that answered the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chen. I know we've passed already the 10 o'clock mark, so I want to thank our panelists, Irene, Robert, Jamie, Oliver, and David for your brilliant and interactive discussions. I always learn so much in hearing all of you speak and discuss. I wish to thank once again our partners and sponsors for this webinar, Roccolini, Rivia Group, and DS Lawyers, as well as our media partner, bâtiments. This presentation will be available for replay and will be sent to you for email, so you'll be able to go through all the points that were discussed. HKCBA will continue to host various online events during, unfortunately, this new normal. So please follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter to stay tuned with upcoming webinars. Speaking of upcoming webinars, HKCBA Toronto will be hosting a Chinese New Year event this afternoon at noon. And HKCBA Montreal will host another webinar entitled A Tale of Two AI Cities, Artificial Intelligence Ecosystems in Canada and in Hong Kong on March 10th at 9 a.m. And I hope that you can join us. We will be available to help you if you require any assistance with Hong Kong or Asia related matters. So don't hesitate to reach out to us and we'll try to help you the best that we can. Thank you all for joining us. Take care and have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much, Cindy. Excellent job.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, everyone.